Greetings, brothers and sisters. I got a movie to review, trailer called Civil War. Hopefully, it doesn't get copyrighted. I can send you the whole trailer because it is really important. It is a mainstream media, liberal media movie about a civil war that happens in America. Then a bunch of things to do with Biden's mishandling of Israel and the political landscape for him and how he's, getting rolled up that even Morning Joe has to talk about. A few other interesting articles. And then I want to do a sort of health update and, another narrative at the end of this video. But I wanted to do this first. This is something that I kind of have been aware of, but I haven't really, in a very sort of subtle way. But I haven't really ever articulated it in a way that, even to myself, like I'm aware of it, but not in a way that I have thought about it in a sort of concrete way, and I certainly haven't presented it anywhere here. And it's something that I think is essential knowledge to understand, and it has to do with what wisdom truly is. What is wisdom? Because wisdom doesn't come to everybody. Not everybody as they get older is wise, right? No fool like an old fool, right? Like there's sayings about it. But wisdom can come to people. And the people that wisdom comes to follow a very specific path. And what that's about, like true wisdom, what it's about is as you get older, more of your soul's knowledge, more of your soul's experience, more of your understanding and perception of the world is opened up through experiences in your life. Now, on a psychological level, this is considered developmental milestones, right? So when a baby's born, it's helpless. Like a baby is born prematurely. Like a baby can't survive. When you see animals born in the wild, some of them can't see. Like you see like rabbits and dogs, they're born with their eyes closed. They're not ready to have vision, and they have to like be in a den or something with a kangaroo being in its pouch, right? But a lot of animals, they have to get up and run and walk, within hours of being born. Like if you've ever been around a baby calf or a baby goat or one of these herd animals, they're immediately food. They're born into a world where things are trying to eat it immediately. I mean, that's everything, but specifically these herd animals, and they got to get up on their feet. They got to get up on their feet within the first day. Like anything longer than a day, that thing's left behind. The herd has to move, right? Cows, if you have cattle, you'll find that oftentimes the calves and the heifers are born in a rainy night, like a stormy night, because the predators are inside sleeping. They're not, hunting and things. And so being born when it's raining is beneficial to the, to the animal. It gives them a, extra period of time where they don't have to worry about predators, right? And so, there's alpacas have like a 14th month gestation period. Alpacas are kind of like a Ponzi scheme animal. They're worth like $10,000, $20,000 the whole thing, but they take forever to give birth, right? Over a year. And humans, 9 months is a long time, but human babies are basically helpless for the first 3 or 4 months, 6 months. Then they start to crawl. Then they can start. I mean, they can't feed themselves. They can't move. They're just laying there, right? But in that first couple year period, there's all these developmental milestones. And, what is the etheric ego and what's the consciousness from a previous existence and, whatever your soul's knowledge is, it takes a while for it to descend into the child, right? It descends in different stages. And that's why as you get older, you look back and you see how much of a dummy you were when you were younger. Like I think about things I used to do and I have no idea why I did them, right? It might have been just the way I used to act when I was younger. When you act like, foolish when you're a kid and, as you get older, you party, you do things. But as as you age physically and you have these experiences and you have challenges, it's like you have these programs inside of you. It's latent knowledge. It's unreleased knowledge. It's unreleased consciousness. It's unreleased perception of the world. It's something you were born with, but it isn't available to you until the experience, things happen in your life as you become an adult, you have full-time jobs, having kids, getting married, And all of a sudden there's things inside of you that you knew about it. It happens when you're a farmer. It happens when you are doing things that are, have been done in your ancestry or in your past lives or whatever, your family ancestry, your genetic makeup, and as well as your previous experiences as a human being or something like that, if you've had past lives. It's also these things called samskaras, impressions that you have, that are attached to your etheric being, and they're these programs, and they're defining moments and stories and, things within your system. It could be that you're like you have an addiction, which I talk about, or something like that. Like that's the best example. But it could be being an artist, or it could be being an athlete, and you have those conditions, and your soul creates those conditions physically and in your environment, and you have people in your life, coaches and teachers and people that will pull that destiny. You have a destiny inside of you, and these external circumstances will pull these things out of you. Like me doing this job, like I've changed tremendously in my perception of the world from doing this job here on the on YouTube. Just doing all the stuff that I'm doing, certainly doing the meditation, the Sajmarg meditation has helped me on a spiritual level. And my perception, my ability to understand what's going on in the world, the lens in which I see the world has changed significantly because of experience, because of, things that were in my external life that pulled out inner knowledge and inner consciousness, and there's a shift there, right? It's what makes you stop doing stupid things. Like if you're making the same stupid mistakes over and over again, I'm going to cover Draymond Green. He just smacked a guy last night, and he's going to get a significant suspension. And, I've talked about him in the past. But if you're doing the same things over and over again, you don't acknowledge them as being a mistake, and you can't see it from a different perspective, then you just make the same mistakes. This is what happens with addicts. It happens with, people who are, just self-sabotaging their whole life, doing dumb things, and until they, ultimately do something dumb and their life ends prematurely, or they end up in jail or whatever it might be. Like they just don't get it. They just can't see it from a higher level. They don't rise up and learn, right? They don't evolve and, raise their consciousness to a higher level where they stop doing these, self-destructive behaviors. They don't have any wisdom. Wisdom is that you see things from a specific level, wherever your consciousness level is, wherever you're a college kid, you're in high school, you're, a young person, right? And then all of a sudden you can see it from a completely different level, right? Like when kids begin to speak, they have a level of comprehension. They have a level when they begin to read and write. And, there's all these major milestones when they're kids. It starts pulling their personality out of them. Because oftentimes when you see your kids as babies, as toddlers, their personalities will transform in front of you. And by the time they're adults, they're nothing like what they were when they were younger, right? They now have a more defined personality, and they have a, way of being, and a perception, and a way of conducting themselves in the world. And that has to change and evolve and grow as you become older. But people resist change. There's lots of people who are emotionally still children. There's so many people who don't mature emotionally. They don't mature in these other ways. They are resisting to the changes around them, and they are, stuck in some way, right? And for them, there will never be wisdom because they don't move to a higher level of consciousness. This idea came to me, like I was aware of it, but I hadn't really articulated it, like I said, even to myself in some way that I'm explaining it here. But you see it when kids get sick. You can see it in your own life when you get sick, but it's easier to see in kids, and all of a sudden they're different, right? It's like a kid who goes through a growth spurt, but it's internally, and something happens to them, or they have a trauma. Some kid gets really sick, like almost dies, or, I got mono really bad when I was a kid. I wasn't going to die, but I was like, bedridden for a couple months. I missed almost a whole year of school. I was like, in fourth grade, right? And it was, really sucky. And I lost like a year of my life, but it changed me. Like it's a defining event in my life. It's something I'm aware of changing me, right? Kids will break a leg, or they'll, go through a trauma or something like this, and they'll come out more evolved. Or, parents break up, and a 12-year-old kid has to be the man of the house because his dad abandoned them or left, or a parent dies or something. And the kids will step up and start, the older kids will start parenting their younger siblings, and they have to grow up sooner than later, right? 15-year-old kid gives birth and all of a sudden has to be a mom. And again, they're not going to be as good as they would be if they were 20, but they start, stepping into that role even as they're not really prepared for it and they're not ready for these things, right? That's what happens to kids when they, and young people, teenagers, when they have to do adult level things when they're not ready to handle them, and it affects them. They're traumatized, right? It prevents them from developing a natural way, like a natural trajectory in which they're developing on time and on schedule. And, these inappropriate things that happen to kids, they're exposed to sexual content at a young age. It affects them, right? They lose their childhood innocence, right? Kids who are learning and growing up by playing, this playing is so important. The games kids play is so important for their development. But if they're being yelled at and they're being abused and they're constantly worried about their parents or they're, in an unsafe environment, they can't just safely dive into their play. They have to keep some of their consciousness aware of their surroundings and make sure they're safe because they're not safe, right? So they can't dive in and just play with all their energy and their consciousness and develop and learn and experience the world and, accumulate their, this more of their soul energy or whatever it is. They have to be, split their consciousness to be aware of their surroundings or not play at all because they're engaged in, child labor or whatever their, circumstances is. But anyways, I'm just saying this because of, the importance of understanding when you're younger, there's going to be these changes. And through life circumstances and events and, these things that you go through, whether it be diseases or whether it be other challenges in your life and marriage and divorce and raising kids and, whatever crises you go through, going and being a soldier in a war, all these types of things. You're going to have these, these tumultuous challenges. But if you go about the right way, you will, you'll evolve and you'll gain wisdom and you'll be able to see the world in a whole different way. Like I see the world completely different. I was thinking about, the way I used to act. Maybe I was in college and I can't remember the specifics. It was only yesterday. And some of the things that I'm like, why did I do that? Like, why would I, like I'm just a different person. The way I present myself to the world, the way I, interact with circumstances has changed incredibly, right? Like decisions I make now are completely different than how I used to react to similar circumstances, right? I used to get emotionally triggered or overwhelmed or whatever it was, right? Through the, aging process and doing Sajmarg, the meditation, the cleaning, and just all of it. And I'm just much more relaxed and I'm less concerned and, I don't care what people think. I mean, these things have changed in me, like, and I can't always pinpoint when it happened. Some of them, there were specific events and, things that unfolded, but I know those changes are there. Like I can compare myself now the way I used to, the way I do things now to the way I used to do them. And the way I used to think about things, the way I used to react to them. And it's, the changes are there. And, the change happen over time. So you're not like totally aware of it as you are in like a physical situation, right? When a kid goes from crawling to walking, it's, it's a big deal. And then when they get to learn how to run and talk and feed themselves and, they learn to be, potty trained in these things. These are big events and they are, but a kid isn't conscious of them because they're so young. But things like that, where there's abilities that you get or whatever it might be, that you are able to, see a definitive change. But things that happen internally, you don't see so much. But if you compare yourself over time and you think about the way you used to handle things, the way you used to handle circumstances and just, being in relationships and, dealing with disappointments or whatever it might be, you'll start to see that there's an evolution that's happening, right? And this is like the true definition of wisdom, where there's more of something inside of you that was always there and was ready to be used and utilized at the appropriate time, but it just took, your whole life and, years and years of living on planet Earth to develop and cultivate and pull out of these things that are inside of you. Anyways, I just thought I would introduce the video this way. Let's get into this trailer of this movie. Okay, so let's get into this. This is a film that apparently was filmed mostly in Atlanta. It's called Civil War, starring Jesse Plemons and Kirsten Dunst. They're married, I believe, a married couple. And I hope they let me show the whole trailer here. If not, you can go watch it on your own. But, the stupid film companies copyright you for showing their trailer. And it just, you're promoting their film. In this case, this is a film I'm looking forward to seeing because we've seen a lot of right-wing fringe films, films that QBs like to watch that are about this subject, right? I've seen some of them myself. Of course, there was that movie. I didn't see that movie, but I watched the trailers. It was, the sucky one with The Sound of Freedom, right? That became a more popular film. I saw somebody sent me that like homemade film. I didn't watch the whole thing. It was god awful, but it was called My Son Hunter. It was about Hunter Biden. There were some funny bits, but it was so poorly done, and it's so right wing. But this is liberal media. This is A-list actors. This is coming from liberal Hollywood, and it is about a civil war in America, the kind of thing that we know is potentially going to happen. And you can't tell very much from the trailer in terms of it's going to have maybe some liberal perspective, but it's fairly realistic and it's got good production values, right? So now liberal Hollywood is taking on something that we have known as a possibility now for a number of years, right? A growing division within the country, and people on the the right-wing side of it who are armed, and so many of them have military training, turning on the government, right? And so let's get into it here.
Have seceded.
The United States Army ramps up activity.
The White House issued warnings to the Western forces as well as the Florida Alliance.
The three-term president assures the uprising will be dealt with swiftly.
Let me know if you want to try anything on.
Are you guys aware there's like a pretty huge civil war going on all across America?
We just try to stay out. With what we see on the news, seems like it's for the best.
Something that we could see this in real life, right?
Citizens of America.
The so-called Western forces of Texas and California
Have suffered a very great defeat at the hands of the United States military.
Mr. President, do you regret the use of airstrikes against American citizens?
So this, this line here, right, where the president is ordering airstrikes in civilian areas. Say the same thing that's going on in the Gaza Strip, right? This is, where you could see, American planes bombing American citizens, right? These are things that, are, this is a reality that is a possibility, and even in some ways a likelihood to some extent.
We're moving to D.C. today.
We need to go down there.
They shoot journalists on sight in the Capitol. Every instinct in me says this is death.
Flooded.
Every time I survived the war zone, I thought I was sending a warning home. Don't do this. But here we are.
There's some kind of misunderstanding here. What? Well, you're American, okay?
Okay. What kind of American are you? You don't know?
The Western forces will reach the White House on July 4th.
Oh my God.
Get in the car! Get in the car!
Move, move, move!
Well, it says all empires fall, right? Now, this is stuff that's been going around the truth community. Of course, they saw with The Sound of Freedom, it was financially beneficial to make movies like this. There's a large audience. We have all this liberal woke junk out there, that's out there that nobody wants to watch. Feminist agenda stuff. All these things are pushing the Marvel movies no one wants to see anymore, right? And The Sound of Freedom, which again, sucky movie, sucky trailer, shill stuff, doing damage to the whole human trafficking thing, all of it. It was a QB movie, like a QB, whatever it was, but it was really financially successful. And we know this stuff is there, right? we know how people are feeling about what's going on. And it just takes the inflation to reach its true level. The way the inflation should be right now is like 100%, like double prices from 2019, maybe even more than that, 200% inflation, to where people wouldn't be able to eat, and then disruption in services, and the internet not being there, electricity, food shortages, whatever. It just takes something like that for something like this, right? Like that's where people are at. And, the tension and the division that's been created here, and they're actually pushing for this, right? The powers that be want this, right? America needs to be taken down in their view. American lifestyle, America everything. And, things to get so bad where they can come on and offer Agenda 30 to most people, and they'll take it or whatever it might be, right? I mean, this is what they want. They want to destabilize the country because the economy is, they can no longer fudge the numbers. Your lifestyle is out of stock, right? Your lifestyle is out of stock.
You're gonna hang back.
I'm not hanging back.
One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go, 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 go!
God bless America.
So, it looks really well done to production values and whatever their perspective is. This is gonna, it'll be something that is, not like, this isn't science fiction, right? Like this isn't so far off or so unbelievable that we wouldn't see this. You have those, right-wing movies about, Harrison Ford played the president, whatever those, there's that guy used to go on Alex Jones, he's supposed to be the real Jack Ryan, the Jack Ryan movies, and all these, military movies that come from the right wing. And I'm not sure which group is pushing this, but they're purposely targeting an audience, people who are Republican, people who are pro-military, people who are QBs now, these things. But this is something that looks more, balanced, right? Certainly not just a right-wing movie, whatever their perspective. Then you have the left-wing movies, the things that are CIA propaganda, like those Zero Dark 30. There's a couple, this woman director, she won an Academy Award for one of those movies, Zero Dark 30, and the other one, and, they're just CIA propaganda. So you have these two things that it's either one or the other. This one looks a little bit more balanced. I don't know. Haven't seen it. It was a well-done trailer. And it's, it's a reality that's, a future possibility that's becoming more and more into focus, more and more believable. So then I saw this. I turned on the news. Biden administration not planning to limit aid to Israel. And he said this. Here was his money quote. See if I can find it here. He said this. This is JoJo Magoo. We're not going to do a damn thing other than protect Israel in the process, not a single thing. Then CNN, rifts between Biden and Netanyahu spill into public view. And so now there's this. I think he has to change, and with his government, this government in Israel is making it very difficult for him to move. So like he's been saying stuff like that.
To openly criticize Israel's prime minister, Biden telling donors moments ago that Israel is losing worldwide support, and Israel's prime minister has a, quote, tough decision to make. Biden said Netanyahu, quote, has to strengthen and change his conservative plan to find a long-term solution to the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians.
So Biden is trying to, play both sides here.
The annual Hanukkah reception in the White House turned into a bastion.
Wait, what was it? What kind of reception was it?
The annual Hanukkah reception in the White House turned into a bastion of public support for Israel's war on Hamas.
You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist, and I'm a Zionist.
Woo! He's a Zionist. So I think I saw this before, but one of my viewers sent this to me on Instagram, and I just happened to see it this morning, so I thought I'd put it in here.
You're going to pay somewhere between 20 and 40% less in those other countries. Same exact drug, made by the same exact company.
You mad, bro? Right? You know, like...
Every South American country which has had its government overthrown by the CIA since 1947. Costa Rica in 1948, Guatemala in 1954, El Salvador 1979, Nicaragua in 1981, Panama 1989, Paraguay 1954, Brazil 1964, Peru 1968, Chile 1973, Uruguay 1973, Argentina 1976, and Venezuela in 2002. Many of these were perceived as ideologically opposed to the United States, were leftist dictatorships, or were some combination of the two.
I knew about a lot of this stuff going on, but that puts it into, clearer perspective. So here, Dandy Don Lemon cut the cord with corporate media, reveals he watches Ben Shapiro and Piers Morgan since firing. It says here, Don Lemons seems to have no interest in watching his former mainstream media colleagues since he's shocking Ouster and CNN earlier. Writing this in an electric streaming palette now has him turning into some conservative commenters. So all of a sudden, this guy, right, CNN was the biggest proponents of censoring all of us. Like CNN couldn't beat all the stuff that's going on the alternative media. And Don Lemons was a big part of that, calling it, whatever fake news, whatever du jour thing they were saying. I have some of the clips that this is, real. What he's doing is real news. What we're doing is, lies and deception. But now he's no longer watching that crap, right? And he's watching, Ben Shapiro certainly isn't a truther, but, he's more along those lines. And then there's this Twitch streamer, Whole Noel, describes abusive ex-shotgun attack. He just looks so evil. And I want to talk about that because it's something I talk about in terms of when people have like a demon, abuse demon come over them. And I'll get into more of that in just a moment. So let's start with what I just showed you. I haven't talked about this in a while, but I used to talk about it all the time. I used to cover more abuse stuff, and I just got tired of talking about it. I worked as a clinician and a counselor in different treatment centers with sex offenders. I worked with abuse. My ex was someone who claimed that she was abused by her dad and mom, in a variety of ways, sexually, physically, mentally, emotionally. And she had her different sort of meltdowns, psychological meltdowns and things, and would get into a state where it appeared she had multiple personalities. I don't know if it was an act. I don't know if it was manipulative. I can't really say. I have mixed feelings about it. Some of it was real and authentic and genuine, organic, or whatever it was. And it's something that I heard over and over again from kids in treatment centers, victims of abuse. And it's what I call the Jekyll and Hyde effect. That these abusers were often reasonable people, nice people, charismatic people in, one sphere of their life, Dr. Jekyll. But when they get into this abusive mode, their faces would change and contort and look like a different person. You can see this even when people get angry. You can see this when, somebody who's usually a mild-mannered person gets angry, and there's like this other kind of, expression. It's like it's like the Gremlin movies where there's, that Gremlin movie where you don't feed the gremlins after midnight, or don't get them wet, or whatever it was. Don't feed them after midnight. And they change from these cuddly little creatures to something else, right? And, there was the same basic bone structure, but it was like you were dealing with a different person. You were dealing with a different entity, like something came over the person, like a demonic version of them. And, I heard this over and over again. Many of you have probably experienced this. Many of you have been in abusive situations. You might have a loved one or whatever, as a kid or whatever, was like a certain kind of a way, reasonable person, and then they would change into this other demonic being. And this happens time and time again. Like I have thought about this over and over again, that it might be something where there's just shared consciousness and some other sort of entity or something inside the person, whatever it might be. But this has been reported. People who have suffered abuse and have seen this, just not even just that in their own life, where somebody just turns and something comes out of them that you weren't expecting. And it was foreign. And oftentimes the person doesn't remember what they did. They might remember it, but it's very vague. It was like they were, overcome by something. It's like some kind of abuse program that's passed through people, like a virus, like a physical virus on a, like an emotional, spiritual level, abuse virus. And it, is in the person, and, they keep it down, like their immune system is keeping it at bay. I want to talk about this, the physical virus, in a bit, but their defense mechanisms are keeping it at bay. But in times of weakness and overwhelm, something comes out of the person, and it just, scares you. And then, you never really trust that person again, because no matter how reasonable and rational they are and how many times they apologize, that any minute this thing can emerge from them, and this thing is destructive, and, it's out of control, and you can't really trust them. It's like they're carrying around with them. Every person who's been a victim carries around an internal version of the abuser. They have the abuser inside them, because you have everything that you experience inside of you. We all have memories that are similar to computer memories, except our memories are on different levels. There's things that we repress, things we don't want to remember, but they're in there. They can come out through hypnosis or other things, right? And if you've been abused, you then internalize that person into your system in such a, horrible, horrific act, traumatizing, that it has a strong presence inside of you. So every victim has an internal abuser, and that abuser is either trying to come out, and, the abuser might be destroying you from the inside, telling you a piece of crap, or, whatever, like your internalized version of that person. Like your parents tell you you're worthless and whatever, they're emotionally abusive, and you just hear their voices every time you fail, even though they've been dead for a long time. You hear them telling you what a piece of crap you are, and you carry that with you. And that, these programs, these versions of people's behavior and the way that they were and their essence is inside you. You've recorded them, right? And so, it's something that's just there, something to be aware of, especially now that things start to go south, right? Because when you're feeling good, when you're feeling strong, your immune system works. But when you're weakened and you're freaked out, you're out of control, and things start happening, the society breaks down. And you see this in war. People will do things you never thought they would possibly do, or they never thought they would possibly do. Things come out in war, like things that are, so selfish and so, violent and despicable, that, what people will do, soldiers will do in war, and individuals will do in war, when there's no rule of law and everything's broken down and people are traumatized and things. People engage in behaviors that are deplorable. And, sometimes it's the nicest people who, never thought they had it in them, but they do, right? They've just been repressing these negative aspects. Just like with divinity within you, some of the worst people can, in the right moment, be, have the divinity that's within them and rise up to that. Even though they can't do it most of their lives, they have their moments. People have their moments. Sometimes, good people do bad things, and, bad people do good things, and it emerges from them. And if you look at the content that's out there, you see more and more. I'm going to cover the Draymond Green thing, like I said, on my other channel, most likely today or tomorrow if I can't get it in today. But more and more you see it's the year of the F it, and things just are breaking down. Like things just are collapsing around us. This movie being released, the trailer that I showed you, if they didn't copyright it, it's always a possibility. But the trailer and the movie, and then what's happened with Biden and Israel, and the guy's losing votes by backing Israel, but he's got his handlers. It's a whole interesting dynamic. And to go along with this, I was talking about this with my wife. How remember when it's coronavirus, but now it's COVID. Like Corona. There was a Corona beer commercial we saw, and like I was fast forwarding through the commercials, and I was like, oh, remember when Corona beer was freaking out when coronavirus was called coronavirus, right? And there's people who debate it didn't exist at all, or it's just the flu bees, right? All these things that came out. Different people had different ways of looking at it. There's no such thing as viruses. Viruses aren't alive and all these things. But in terms of what they said a virus is, and, I believe this is a biological weapon. If it came from a virus, fine. If it did, it is whatever it is. But we've all had experiences with some virus. The Epstein-Barr virus. I had mono when I was I think it was 10 years old. I missed a good portion of the school year. And, I think I mentioned that earlier in this video. And I also had what was, known as herpes, right? Some kind of herpes virus, which for me was, I would get a lip sore. Lip sores were herpes virus, and those were going around when I was a kid. And so, people had different forms of herpes, but mine manifested in lip sores. And both of those viruses would come, be a factor when I got sick. Like the mono would come back when I got sick. Of course, the chicken pox, right? Whatever that virus is where people get shingles. But whenever my immune system was down, I slept a lot. Mono is like a sleeping sickness. And, occasionally when I got sick or I was physically overwhelmed, I would get lip sores. Into my, I think, 20s, I haven't had one in years. But, so these are things that I was told were viruses in my system, right? And that, your body's constantly fighting them off. Your immune system is fighting these things off, which maybe is a good thing, who knows, keeps your immune system ready. And sometimes your immune system relaxes or, it forgets to fight the thing off, or it's fighting other things, or you're just worn down, or your immune system is suppressed. As you get older, you're not producing as much testosterone and other things. And so these things are then just waiting to come out and affect you again, right? They're waiting to, rise up again in your physical system. And if that's the case with this COVID, and, the COVID is a biological weapon, then it would be, prudent for everybody, at least for me, as far as I'm concerned, to get rid of it, right? And so, I've done some detoxing, and I don't know how to go about it because there's not that much information about it now. Later on, there will be. And, being sick again, which I've been for the past week, I don't have any symptoms. I felt completely better on Sunday. I was taking this motherwort tea, which is good for the heart and other things. It's an herbal tea. And again, I don't recommend anything here, and I always say that because I want to make sure people understand I'm just talking about my own experience and not recommending things. But, I've had some irregular heartbeats on and off from from the time I got, I think, the second version of COVID. And, there's something to do with your nervous system. There's things in this thing that they're not telling people. There's vascular things. There's things to do with your immune system. It messes with people even on a psychological level. Remember Chris Cuomo saying he was having psychological issues and hallucinations? And people were like, well, that's strange. And then it came out there, all the people were, there's all these people that were having psychological issues, and they were, seeing things and hallucinating. And, there's all these bizarre symptoms with the COVID, the COVID, whatever it is, virus or whatever it is, right? There was one day I was worried I was going to get sick, sick. And I did some things, I rolled out everything. I had these herbal flu shots. I had these, they're oral. They're filled with all these strong doses of, these herbs. You just have herbs in it. Tastes horrible. But I have this, this Echinacea Golden Seal spray that tastes, it's maybe the worst tasting stuff. But I spray it on my tonsils when I feel my tonsils are often swollen, right? Which is a sign of, prolonged kind of, being whatever, fighting off things. Your tonsils are to do with your immune system. And I sprayed that first, and the flu shot tastes great. This heavy herbal, thick, syrupy stuff, right? But I did everything I could before going to bed, and I woke up, felt better, and I knew I wasn't going to get sick. But I felt a little bit lingering. Some days I've been a little bit, tired, or just, I don't have much stamina. I get out of breath easy. Most of the other symptoms have gone away. You know, but it's something where I've been aware of, like every year I'm going to have to, you know, deal with this as we head into the fall season, the winter season. There's less sunlight. I'm getting less vitamin D. I'm, you know, less exercise, right? The heat comes on, dries out everything. And we have a humidifier in our bedroom, but, you know, it's something that just lingers. And, you know, what is it? Like, what other, the long-term effects, right? If this is a biological weapon, which I believe it is, then what are the long-term effects of this thing, right? What's going to, you know, how is it going to affect people? Of course, the bloop that people got, which is even worse. And so, you know, it might not kill everyone right away, but it's going to weaken people, which is, I think, the ultimate goal, right? And, you know, stop young people from reproducing. All these things. Like, there's all these things we don't know about yet, right? As all this stuff proliferates over a period of time. And then we get the final, you know, the actual outcome of whatever this thing is that's been introduced in the human system. You know, the one thing, the COVID thing, and the so-called cure of it. And so that'll be interesting how it plays out, especially now, you know, going with all this political aspect and the wars and the breaking down of society, right? You know, weakening people physically is a big part of that, especially the future generations of young people, you know, as they have to be pacified. And, you know, there'll be medicines like AIDS and things that, you know, you'll have to be taking the rest of your life. And so people get on these medicines that'll help to keep them from having a cardiac arrest, say. Like they'll come up with a medicine to prevent all these cardiac arrests, but it'll have, you know, also it'll have negative side effects, weakening you. And then you'll be beholding to the government to have this medicine that if you don't take it, you're going to like die almost immediately, something like that, right? Like that's how it was with AIDS. Like they got rid of AIDS, but you know, now all these people are on these medicines they have to take for the rest of their lives, right? HIV and things like that. So anyways, just some thoughts here. I'm going to wrap this up and get into the Draymond Green thing. But you know, it's a real mess out there. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano definitely pointing to the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.